Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. I'm Matt,
I'm Sheryl.
and we jump back into the very ripe pop music year of 1984. We're going to talk about one of the biggest global hits of that year, and really one of the all-time great comeback
Comebacks.
stories in
Yes.
popular music history. The story's great on multiple levels, but
Yeah.
really an incredible comeback story and emergence of a great talent to the wider listening public. And Sheryl is going to talk about her album of the year for 1984. And it's been a while since we did one of these, Sheryl. I guess you've been wrestling with an existential crisis regarding your favorite album of 1984.
Yeah, I was struggling there for a while, and then, I just decided to dig in, and all of a sudden, I was inspired, and I'm excited to talk about my album now.
I'm excited to hear you talk about your album. It's a very good record. Certainly one of my favorite albums of the year for 1984 as well. Since we last got together, went to see Indigo Girls in concert. They played Revolution Hall, which is an old disused high school that they turned into a performing arts venue here in Portland.
Mhm.
They had a full rock ensemble playing behind them. It was like 8 pieces total, including Emily and Amy. And it's a small venue. The venue, I think, is more suited toward quieter acoustic, folk-based artists. So they had a pretty rocking band behind them. The female drummer, kick-ass drummer, really good, but loud, heavy hitter. And it kind of overpowered the mix a little bit in that. Well, what I noticed early on, Emily's vocal mic was too low. And I was like, God, they need to crank her mic up. And then when her first song comes in, I'm like, oh, so you can see why that's down because her voice is not in good shape. She's dealing with some sort of a chronic medical issue, I understand. I didn't know this going in.
Okay, I was gonna say, you'd think that if anyone's voice was not really holding up, it'd be Amy's because she has a much more,
Yeah.
rasp to her voice. It's always kind of had
Oh,
that.
no. She sounds as good as ever. She's still very strong vocally.
She's my favorite, actually. I prefer her vocals.
Yeah, her songs are edgier, kind
Yeah.
of more rock edge. I had that second album. They'd kind of gotten the big REM endorsement back then, as I recall. I think REM gave them a big boost
Mm.
to their career. They probably opened for REM on
Yeah, I could
their
see
first
that.
stadium tour. And I didn't realize how many hard rocking songs they actually have.
Yeah.
But Emily's songs are kind of the crowd pleasers. Now, the crowd for Indigo Girls, probably 75% female, and probably 75% of those females accompanied by other females.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they're a huge band in that arena. I mean,
Oh,
obviously
yeah.
they're a
They're
figurehead.
icons.
Yeah, it's very iconic. And a lot of Emily's songs were ones that the whole crowd was singing along to. So in a way, it was kind of heartwarming. It's like they're picking her up, you know.
Yeah.
But her voice is shot. I mean, she sounded like Paul McCartney did on SNL. Same kind of just weak, wavery.
No, that was painful.
Yeah, that was cool to have Paul on the final SNL show, but that was hard to listen to.
But, did you see him on Colbert? He was on Colbert's last show too, and
Yeah.
that was better. I mean, he's in his 80s and his range is so minuscule now, and he just sounds weary and old. But he didn't sound as bad on Colbert, so he might have been having a worse night on SNL.
You're obviously the Beatles freak and the expert here, but my understanding is that he has always resisted adjusting the keys of the song. He's adamant about keeping them in the same register as the record version.
Yeah, and in fact, I've seen him the last few times he's come, and he has definitely adjusted his set list to work for his vocals. You got to respect him for that, especially in this day when so many people not only would be adjusting, but are lip syncing, like literally lip syncing. So the fact that he's singing live, I appreciate that.
Eagles, Eagles.
Oh, God, big time. But so many, I mean, nearly every
Did I say
major
that? I don't want
band.
to get sued. Please don't sue me, Don Hill.
Nearly every major band, to be honest, except for Roger Daltrey from The Who and Paul McCartney. If they are going to continue playing live, they're going to be singing. And so, with that, you have to kind of take it as it is and either be okay with it and just realize this is a 80 something year old man. And just the fact that he's even up there singing at all is a cool thing. Or, I mean, in Paul's case, I think it's really time for him just to be done. But they love it. They love performing live. So you can't blame them for wanting to continue doing it. And Paul just put out a new album. So, he wants to tour.
It's a gorgeous song, the new song that he performed on the show. And I listened to the record, and his vocals still sound kind of week on the record too, but it's such a beautiful song.
But the songwriting is good, and I actually
Yeah.
was really pleasantly surprised when I listened to it. I had 0 expectations, as I always do with Paul, period, like I have for his entire career. But but when it ends up being something that is actually good, I'm always like, "Oh, it's a pleasant surprise," and that's how I really feel about this album because I was just ready to be like, "Paul can't still do it. Does he doesn't have anything left in him, does he?" And yeah, the vocals, they are weak, but it works with the songs. And in the studio, obviously they can do a lot more, so it isn't the same as performing live. And it's not even the new songs probably. He could probably go out and do the new songs with no problem. It's the older stuff that just doesn't really work as well because he can't hit the notes and he will
Yeah.
adjust his set to try to make it so that it fits better in his range, but he's one of the greatest vocalists of all time.
In 1984, he's about the same age as Tina Turner, and he's still having hit records, but not big pop hits. His last big
Yeah.
pop hit was the one with Michael Jackson, right? Say, say, say.
Yes.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah, and that came out in 83.
And then 84, I guess, would have been the soundtrack came out that year, right?
Oh, Give My Regards to Broad Street came out in 1984.
Right.
No More Lonely Nights was a popular song.
No More Lonely Nights was a pretty good hit.
Good song, I like it.
Yeah,
But that flopped big time. The movie
yeah,
was just, like, abysmal. And his credibility from there on really just kinda started to go down, and he really never had a hit again after that.
yeah. But as nice and as solid a hit as No More Lonely Nights was, it wasn't a blockbuster global smash #1 record like he was used to having earlier in his career and with the Beatles.
No.
So those kind of hits weren't really happening for people that age, particularly women. So when Tina Turner comes out of nowhere and has a smash in 1984 with a Private Dancer album and the hit song What's Love Got to Do with It, that was really one of the big musical stories of that year. Tina had obviously been a part of a musical act with her husband Ike for many years. They'd been separated by 1984. It's been about 8 years since she broke away from Ike. Now, I don't want to spend too long on the Ike and Tina Turner story because it's been heavily documented. Of course, there was a great movie about it, What's Love Got to Do with It, starring Angela Bassett. She won an Oscar for her portrayal of Tina in that movie. She had her biography, I, Tina, written by Kurt Loder. Wonderful book, highly recommended, which led to the movie eventually. And also just a superlative documentary that came out in 2021. And you could see it if you got HBO Max, just called Tina. There's some powerful moments in that film. And then there's a whole bunch of other documentaries on you. So her story is pretty well documented, but it was a sad story because they were a talented musical act. The Ike and Tina Turner Review was one of the most electrifying live acts of the era. Very influential. Ike Turner, who's now perceived, he's dead now, but he's perceived as this monstrous figure, and he was a creep, a complete creep. But he should be revered for not only his influence as a musician, but as a black businessman in this era. He had incredible amount of success, basically doing everything himself. He cut out all the middlemen. When they were a recording and touring concern, they didn't have a manager. They did everything themselves, from
Mm.
wardrobe to booking to running various labels. He eventually had his own home studio when that was pretty unusual for an artist to have their own studio. So he was really ahead of the game business wise. He learned some lessons early on that probably affected him. And even though they weren't having smash hit after smash hit on the pop charts, through the 60s and early 70s, this dude was making piles of cash because they were always working, they were always recording, they were always on the road. And it was such a low overhead operation because they didn't hire all of these middlemen and outside interests that sap up all of the income. So he's just basically bringing home suitcases of cash after all these tours. So they were very successful. But he was a horrible person. He treated her like garbage.
Mhm.
And, we've set this podcast up to be family friendly, so we don't use curse. This is hard for me to talk about Ike and Tina Turner without using certain words. But she finally broke away from him in 1976, and they eventually divorced, and she got nothing. I mean, got completely cut out financially. And not only that, but because of her abruptly leaving the organization, the group, the review, they had all of these contracts they were unable to fulfill, all these concerts that were booked. that they had to renege on, and they got sued, and she became responsible for all of the financial and legal ramifications of that as well, just because of the way
Horrible,
the
horrible.
contracts were drawn up.
Yeah.
And basically, she said she wanted free of this man so badly that she was willing to give all of that up. And she is somebody who's enjoyed the high life. She enjoyed nice things, and she gave it all up. The only thing she said to the judge was, "I want my name," because that's not her real name. That was a name that Ike came up with when he realized that she was going to be his meal ticket.
Mm.
the,
Mhm.
the guy was nothing if not savvy. I mean, he understood talent, he understood the music business,
Yeah.
and he realized right away, once that she got into the fold, that she was going to take him to much higher heights than he'd already experienced. So her name was Anna Mae Bullock, and before she was married to him, he changed her name to Tina Turner. It became the Ike and Tina Turner Review. And she wanted that name back because it had been established. She didn't want to start completely from scratch
Yeah.
with her own name. And he kind of fought her on that too. So she had to wrest it away from him in court. So for years, she's just struggling to stay afloat with all these legal responsibilities and bills that she's got to pay. She took menial jobs in addition to doing her music just to make ends meet. And a lot of people think of Private Dancer 1984 as her solo debut. She'd actually put out a bunch of records before that. Even before she left Ike, she had a couple of solo records that they put out. Now, she was in the movie Tommy, where she played the Acid Queen and sang that song beautifully.
Mhm.
And they tried to capitalize on that, put out a solo record called Acid Queen with her doing rock music. This is in 75. She's still with Ike at this point. She put out a country record the year before that got Grammy nominated but didn't sell for crap.
Hmm.
And then once she broke away from Ike, a couple of records in the late 70s trying to gain a foothold that really just didn't go anywhere commercially. But I was certainly aware of Tina Turner before Private Dancer because she was out there. I mean, she was like a C-list celebrity,
Yeah.
but she was on TV a lot. She'd show up in a lot of different things.
And Proud Mary was one of those songs that was still around.
Right. That was the biggest hit for Ike and Tina, which was their cover of Creedence Clearwater Revival's Proud Mary in 71. And
Mhm.
you listen to their music kind of in the late 60s where they're getting funkier and tighter and leaner. And you can see where John Fogerty really drew a lot of influence from their sound and from Ike Turner as a guitar player. And he had to have been absolutely thrilled that they covered his song because I think they influenced each other in a way. But yeah, their memorable cover of Proud Mary was a big hit in the early 70s. They had a couple of minor hits before they petered out in the mid 70s. But now she's trying to make herself contemporary as music is undergoing this change in the 80s. And she, at one point, was a big Vegas act. She had this cabaret show, with horns and backup dancers and costume changes and doing a lot of covers of like show tune type music for the Vegas crowd.
Which she probably could have continued doing for years and years and
Yeah.
stayed at that
Well,
level.
so many musicians, it's a job and it's a slog. It's not,
Yeah.
if you're not having hit records, you got to do a lot of stuff just to make ends meet. So she's doing these Vegas residencies, she's playing hotels, trying to get it going as a solo act, but not getting anywhere. She put out a couple records on United Artists, which she put out Icantina records previously, just didn't take off. So she ends up with this residency at the Ritz in New York, which proved to be really kind of pivotal, working with the rock band. And for a long time, she'd really thought of herself as a rock and roll singer. And my biggest gripe, I think, with the documentary, and I don't think it emphasizes, and a lot of the stuff I've read and watched about Tina Turner, to me, doesn't emphasize enough the influence that I believe that she had on hard rock vocalizing. I mean, you could make an
Mhm.
argument that two of the biggest influences on hard rock music from the vocalist standpoint were women, Tina Turner and Janis Joplin. And in the case of Janis Joplin was very influenced by Ike and Tina's records from the early 60s. That was a huge part of influencing her sound. And then she, in turn, began influencing these male rock singers. When hard rock starts to become a thing in the late 60s, turn of the 70s, it's very blues based. It's drawing a lot from black music. Now,
Yeah.
it eventually evolved into something that didn't draw as much. I think that's kind of the distinction between early hard rock and what we call heavy metal.
Yeah.
Is heavy metal is kind of removing the black influence and bringing in more of a classical influence.
Mhm. And definitely heavy blues influence in those early, rock bands. The kinda stuff you really like that I don't like as
Yes.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the muddy, heavy,
Yeah.
druggy kinda early the vocals are far more influenced by black music than they would become later on with heavy metal coming to the fore, but I truly believe Tina Turner and Janis Joplin are really 2 of the great influences on hard rock vocal male hard rock vocalists.
Yeah.
So that's how she perceives herself. She's a rock singer. She wants to get down and dirty and wail, and she can knock down walls with her voice. And there's so much vintage footage, not only in the documentary, but scattered on YouTube. Just watch the 65 Big TNT show. I mean, they burned that stage, and they're playing rock and roll. I mean, it's not soul, it's soulful. You can't just pigeonhole it as black music, as R&B, as soul. It's rock. They're rocking for sure, no question.
Yeah.
But anyway, so as a black woman and the way American radio is very segregated, it was going to be very difficult for her to gain any commercial footing or on radio. So nothing really took off on radio. As a black woman, she's perceived as a R&B act, and white pop stations and rock stations just didn't want to hear it. But she does this gig at the Ritz, gets a lot of positive press. A lot of famous people come to see her. Ike and Tina Turner had opened for the Stones in the 60s. Mick Jagger comes to see her Ritz shows, wants them to open for the Stones on their big tour around Tattoo You and Start Me Up. And she's not just an opening act, she's a vital part of the show. She comes out in duets with Mick. When they're on the stage, she's hanging out with Mick and Keith backstage, famously drinking Jack Daniels with Keith Richards before every show. Um, and she's still doing these shows later on when David Bowie comes to see her and brings a bunch of EMI Capital execs to see as well. He'd like backed out on a luncheon date he was supposed to have with some execs. Says, nope, I'm going to go see Tina Turner's show. And he brought a huge entourage with him, put
Mm.
60 people on the guest list. And she'd hired this Australian manager that was trying to get her on Capitol Records. And they had one A&R guy who was sold named John Carter, wanted to bring her in. And then immediately there was a change in leadership at the label. And these new executives are like, who signed this person, this middle-aged
Washed up.
has-been,
Yeah.
who's had all these records that tanked as a solo artist? And she's like, what was this guy thinking? Why would he sign? And it's worse than that. If you watch the documentary, I can't say what this one executive was actually the president of Capitol Records said in relation to Tina Turner, but it's wholly offensive and racial in tone. But this guy, John Carter, fought hard to keep them on the label, and eventually the label acquiesces, but he says, you know what? Fine. Have your little nostalgia act here, but we're giving you pretty much no money for promotion. We're not investing any effort into this woman. And that's part of why she ends up going to England to record, because they wouldn't book any quality studio time for the United States. After she had a hit record in England with a cover of Let's Stay Together, and she teamed up with contemporary artists, British Electronic Foundation, Martin Ware, Ian Craig Marsh, Heaven 17, Human
Human
League
League.
fame, trying to update her sound. And she has this hit with a cover of Al Green's Let's Stay Together in England, a single, standalone single in 83. The label begrudgingly allows her to record an album, says, you only have 2 weeks to do it. And they didn't book studio time in the United States. Really, it's incredible how this album comes together. I mean, they recorded in 5 different studios, 4 different production teams. One of them is Carter himself, who produced the title track, Private Dancer, which should be the last single release from the album, which was a demo given to them by Mark Knopfler, who had originally planned to record it for Love Over Gold, the Dire Straits album. He eventually decided it was more suited to a female voice.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, but that totally makes sense. Just the whole vibe is definitely a Dire Straits song.
Yeah, but clearly the lyric is from a female perspective, so it would be kind of weird for him to sing that song.
Totally, yeah. But just the sound of the music is certainly very Dire Straits.
Yeah, for sure.
And Jeff Beck plays on that too.
Yes. So one of the production teams, one of the studios, features these guys, Terry Britton and Graham Lyle, and they'd co-written the song, What's Love Got to Do With It? A song had been kicking around for a while. They'd pitched the demo to a bunch of different people and been turned down. One recording was made of that song by the British band Bucks Fizz. But Bucks Fizz was like this totally fabricated group put together by these songwriters so they could get their song in the Eurovision Song Contest, which I think more Americans are aware of what Eurovision is now, just because we're in more of a global age with the internet. But it's always been a huge thing in Europe. It's a pop song competition. So each country has their own kind of competitions leading up to Eurovision, where people nominate these songs and they get voted on, and then eventually is the winner, and then that becomes the country's submission into Eurovision. That's how
How
ABBA came
ABBA
to be.
started, yeah.
Yeah. And Bucks Fizz was a bold-faced copy of ABBA. They're
Yes.
basically the British version of ABBA. Not that they were two couples, they weren't. They were four independent people, but two men, two women, very Aryan looking. You had the blonde and the brunette women, but very, very white looking group. Very straight pop band. And their big Eurovision breakthrough was Making Your Mind Up. I had that 45.
Oh, really?
My parents were traveling in Scandinavia at the time and brought that single home for me. So I had the Bucks Fizz debut 45, Making Your Mind Up, when it was their big Eurovision hit. But Tina Turner's manager kind of was friendly with Terry Britton. They're both Australian. Britain, I think, a dual citizenship, Britain and Australia. But he'd come up in Australia. He'd had a successful band in the 60s in Australia called the Twilights. He'd written songs for other artists that were hits. His best known song in America would have been Cliff Richard's Devil Woman.
Oh, okay.
She's just a devil woman. She's
with
gonna
evil.
get you from behind. That cracks me up every time I hear it. She's gonna get you from behind, that devil woman. Better keep your eye in the rearview mirror. She's gonna
She
get you
coming.
from behind. I do like that song.
I
I mean,
love that
I like
song.
a lot of Cliff Richard.
Oh, me too. We've talked about him. Love him,
Well,
love him.
he's on the playlist
I
for
know.
1980. But he had a couple other hits with Carrie, which was a minor hit in the U.S. for Cliff Richard, and then other songs that were hits in England and Australia, but nobody would know them in the United States, and nobody even know these artists. So that's what he's most known for. And then Graham Lyle was in McGuinness Flint, which had big hits in England in the early 70s. Gallagher and Lyle, which is kind of his folk pop act. Again, unless you're a heavy Anglophile, you're probably not familiar with these acts, but they had
No.
hits in England. So they co-wrote this song, Terry Britton and Graham Lyle. They'd gotten Bucks Fizz to record it. Roger Davies, Tina Turner's manager, who really kind of brought her up from the depths of her career, was a huge help to her success. He was instantly sold on the song. He's like, this is a hit. This is a hit song if I ever heard it. They had trouble convincing a lot of other people that that was the case, and especially convincing Tina. She hated the song, wanted nothing to do with it. She's like, I'm a rock singer. This is pop fluff. This is not for me. What are you thinking with this record? And basically, Roger Davies drags her to the studio and says, just meet with the guy, please. Just talk with him. And so she goes to the studio, Mayfair Studio, I think it's the studio they're recording in, and she meets Terry Britton. And even before he could say a word, she's like, Roger's probably already told you, I do not like this song. I do not want to record this song. And basically, he just calms her nerves a little bit and says, let's just work on this song. Let's cut something. Nobody's going to force you to put it on an album. If you hate it after we're done, you can discard it, do whatever you want. But let's just give it a shot. See what happens. And they start tinkering with the song, and they kind of slowed the tempo for her a little bit, let her add her own personal touch to the vocal, and the thing starts rounding into shape. And there's a few elements that help this song on its way, I think. It's a 2-chord pattern on the verses, and it's got that kind of catchy little synth pattern opening up the song, establishing those chords. But I think where the song really takes off is the instrumental section going into the bridge. The instrumental sounds totally like a harmonica, but it's a Yamaha DX7 synthesizer, which I think is kind of the bane of a lot of 80s production. They're brand new in 83. When we talk about the incoming 80s and how music takes a downturn in my book, I think these synthesizers have a lot to do with it. The older analog synthesizers had a warmer sound to them.
Yeah.
These are not analog synths. They're frequency modulated synths. They're more digital. And it's a preset patch for this harmonica, but it's a beautiful sound. And it sounds like, Stevie Wonder would do harmonica sessions on a lot of hit records in this. It sounds totally like something Stevie Wonder would have cut for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, and it's not a harmonica. It's a synth. And it's not the main keyboard player on the record either. His name is Nick Lenny Smith. They brought in this guy named Billy Livesey who played the solo, and he's using the pitch bender wheel on the synth. And it's a pretty simple pattern, but he wanted to keep it within a narrow note range that would be like a harmonica, because harmonica, you're kind of limited on how many notes you could play
Yeah.
just based on, what kind of harmonica it is. But it's a beautiful little instrumental. And then it segues into the bridge, and there's this key change in the bridge that opens up. And then after that bridge, she starts to get up into a higher register. Now the grit starts coming out in her voice, which is her hallmark,
Yeah.
and it just takes the song to another level. So, who could have foreseen this 44-year-old black woman has been survivor of a horrific, abusive, long-term relationship? She's basically a captive, a slave to this horrible guy for years. Had to
Yeah.
run across the freeway, bruised and bleeding, to escape him. By luck, she stumbles into this hotel with a manager up front that was sympathetic to her plight, gave her a room despite the fact she had no money, and protected her, helped her escape this guy. So she's coming from these horrible circumstances. And if you watch the documentary, we don't have time to go into the depths of her story here, but her life had been completely absent of love from her earliest childhood, from her family, her parents. Her mother departed her at an early age. Her father was alcoholic. She was in just a string of relationships with men that were just loveless and they were users. And to have this song become this massive hit and emotionally connect with so
Mm.
many people across the globe, and once her story had come out, she just becomes this universally beloved celebrity. And so late in life after so much trauma, and she just was able to maintain her dignity throughout the whole period leading up to this, and finally gets this delayed payoff. Not that she hadn't had success and made money before, but it was always under somebody else's terms, that she was
Yeah.
completely under this guy's thumb. And then once she broke away from him, had no financial connection whatsoever to this wonderful, a lot of it is wonderful music, and it's certainly worth exploring if you are a fan of, kind of down and dirty rock and roll and funky music. There's a lot of treasure there. But just understand, not a cent of it will go to her or her estate. She's passed on now. They both have, because he completely wrote her out of it. But for her to have this major breakthrough, just incredible. And in the age of MTV, when image was everything, to have this middle aged lady, and the image that she cultivated of herself was a big reason for that success, and the way she looked on the video, and of course, those legs.
Oh my gosh, those $1,000,000 insured legs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think is just so amazing about her story is that she took that image, made it her own, and, was unapologetic about the fact that she's an older woman, still in great shape. She had this vibrance about her.
She was an athletic woman. She was like a basketball player and a cheerleader in
And you
high
can see
school.
that. I mean, you
Yeah.
can see that in just how she carries herself and definitely how she is on stage.
The energy is incredible.
It's even more amazing, like you said, in the time of MTV when the visual aspect was just so important. Once her story came out too and you saw what it took for her to get there, it's just such an incredible story. And, this album is actually kind of weird. It did have 4 different producers.
Right.
It's very disjointed. It does not really feel like a cohesive album in that way.
I'll be honest, don't love the record. And if I were to pick one song as a favorite, it wouldn't be What's Love Got to Do with It. Let's make it our playlist because of the rules we've set down. We're going to have, each of us pick a global smash hit from that year, and that's my pick. But if I were to choose a track from the album as my favorite, it would be the Rupert Hine produced track, Better Be Good to Me. And I know you're a big Rupert Hine fan.
Yes, I love him. And I really like that song too. And that song was a hit for her also, wasn't it? I mean,
Yes,
it
it
was a
was.
single.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the best song on the album as well.
The single version's better. It's tighter, it rocks harder. The album version is a little more languorous, it's
It's
longer.
pretty long, yeah, but it's a
Yeah.
great rock song.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also the message for her is, it's like she's such a badass in that song. Like, you better be good to me. And
And
she means it.
she's not writing these songs, but
No.
part of the reason they pop is because we know her story and they have something to say about her life story, and she's
Mhm.
always telling that life story and the motion of her delivery too.
And she makes them her own. Like
Yes.
she is one of those singers who can really take a song that resonates and turn it into her own. And the way she sings too, there's a power behind her vocals.
Those early Ike and Tina sides, some of those, there were a few vocalists, male or female, that were pushing their voices as hard as she was. I mean, to the absolute limit, just shredding her vocals. Oh, it's
Yeah.
amazing she had any voice left. And she was constantly working. During the Ikatina era, this is how they made money because they didn't have a ton of big hits,
No, they
but
didn't.
they're constantly working. I mean, if they're not cutting a record, they're rehearsing for a show, they're playing a show, they're traveling to a show. Ike Turner was just insane workaholic even before he got into cocaine, which was kind of toward the end of the 60s. And that just increased his monomaniacal behavior and his abusiveness and his paranoia. But she worked her tail off for years, nonstop,
Yeah.
nonstop. All of them did. Then you see how hard she worked on stage. I mean, those stage shows were incredibly energetic.
Mhm.
She was a furious dancer, and it's interesting to watch those young Tina with all the dance moves, and she's a hell of a dancer. And then the mid '80s Tina, the MTV hit era, where she's performing in high heels and like tight leather mini
Yes.
skirt,
Yeah.
which is restricting her movement, so she can't do those crazy wild. But that wasn't the style by then anyway.
Yeah.
But to see the way she moved in those high heels on stage, come
Yes.
on now. I mean, I can't imagine how hard it is to move around in those things. And then to see how graceful she was at that advanced age, moving around on stage in those things, my goodness.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the energy is just off the charts, and she never seemed to lose it. And that's one of the things, too, that makes me so happy that she had such a huge hit and such a comeback so that she could continue touring, on a big stage, big arenas, and like have the audience where she could really just go all out and be who she always was, but have a lot more people exposed to that.
It's a great story. It's a heartwarming story. She is such a fascinating person. But then to see her have this success, it's one of the great who could have seen that coming stories, really. Considering all the resistance from the record company, the lack of success of the preceding albums, her advanced age, her race, her gender, the changing face of music at this time, the emergence of MTV, the importance of image. And on MTV, it was almost exclusively white images that
Yes.
you were getting.
Yeah.
It's hard to comprehend how this transpired. And if you see her Grammy acceptance speech, I mean, she immediately looks to her man. I mean, you got to give this guy a lot of credit because he had the faith in her. Although he was a little leery at first when he took her on, it's like, man, I don't know what I can do with this. But he eventually started to formulate a plan. It took a few years to get that plan rolling. And then he believed in this song when so many other people did
Yeah.
not only believed in the song, but believed that she could pull off this song when she didn't believe the same. Good management is so essential to its success in this business. And she wouldn't have gotten anywhere near sniffing a big hit probably without him believing in her and guiding her in the right direction. So he deserves a lot of the credit here. But she's obviously the immense talent that pulled it off. MTV played this to death, which was
Yes.
part of what makes it hard to single this out as a favorite song on the album, just because we heard it so many times. It was just played into the ground for years on MTV.
Yeah, definitely. But actually, it's a song that I still really like. I mean, I wasn't like a super fan of it at the time because it really wasn't the kind of music I would listen to. But I
Right.
I do think it's a really good song, and it's one that I enjoy now more than I did then. It was very overplayed, but there's a lot of songs like that actually that I found that when I go back and listen to them now, I'm like, actually, I really like that song. That's a good song. I just couldn't give it the time of day back then because it was either not a genre I really liked or I just couldn't stand hearing it again.
Yeah.
But I still really like this song.
Yeah, it's definitely a very good song, a very good production, a great vocal performance. So it's just one of the great stories in one of the massive years for pop music. It's one of the great stories of 1984. Now, one of the other big stories of 1984 was the emergence or continued emergence of an American independent underground rock and roll scene. These are the precursors to what we now call alternative rock, these bands. And they're gaining steam in 1984. And the band that would kind of be the headliner for this movement would put out their second album this year. And Sheryl has chosen REM's Reckoning as her album of the year for 1984.
Yes, I have. And you chose REM Murmur as the album of the year for 1983.
Yes.
Also was on my short list for album of the year as well. You know, those 2 albums, I think, are 2 of the best debut album of all time, but also sophomore album of all time, because really a lot of bands struggle on their second album. I see Murmur and Reckoning as kind of like companion pieces, sort of like Rubber Soul and Revolver.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
So I feel like Reckoning is a bit of a continuation of Murmur. And we've already talked a lot about REM when you did Murmur. You know, they're very connected to Athens, Georgia.
Right.
Mike Mills and Bill Berry were already in bands together before they moved to Athens and had written songs together and brought those songs to Peter Buck and Michael Stipe once they all came together as a band. So they had a lot of songs already written and ready to go. They had been touring for a while. They had played a lot of these songs live. And by the time they got into the studio to record Reckoning, they had like 22 songs or something they originally recorded. Peter Buck initially wanted this to be a double album, but they decided to scale it back. They brought Mitch Easter and Don Dixon back to produce the album for them, which they had also produced Murmur. They were on IRS, which was an independent label, but IRS really wanted them to come up with a more commercial album because their first album sold well, but they wanted control. When they got into the studio, there's conflicting reports as to how long it took them to record this album. Peter Buck in interviews say that it took 11 days. The studio records say I think it took 16 or something like that. And then if you see interviews with Mitch Easter or Don Dixon, they're like, it was at least 20 to 25 days, which is still not very long. They really knew what they wanted when they got into the studio. And the most difficult part for them really was getting Michael Stipe's vocals. He was weary from all the touring they'd done in 1983. And, you know, this is one of those things about REM that is prominent in Murmur and Reckoning. It's very difficult to understand what Michael Stipe is singing. Not even just what he's singing about, but just what he's actually saying. You know, it's hard to decipher his vocals. For me, it does not take away from it at all. And I think I know a lot of people that have problems with REM because they don't like Michael Stipe's vocals. But on this album, I think he really did sort of come into himself more as a vocalist. And he was kind of thrust into the spotlight just being a lead singer, being, you know, kind of the head of this band reluctantly in the first place. It took him a long time to really take on that role and feel comfortable. And he's not quite there yet with Reckoning. I think as the albums go on, once you hit the 90s, Michael Stipe, he's a very intelligent guy and he's always been very articulate, but he comes across as so much more confident. You know, he's an activist, very active in like environmentalism and AIDS research, rock the boat. And he sort of took on this image where they were like spokespeople for that generation. That just feels so different to me when you see REM in the 90s versus what they were in the 80s. Going back to the album, I think every song on the album is good. Some are great. And I do think that it has a little bit more variety. I mean, you even have songs like Don't Go Back to Rockville that's actually like a country song, which you weren't getting a lot of back then.
It's pretty straight country.
It is.
Yeah.
It feels a little disjointed on the album. It does kind of seem like it could have been a standalone single, but I appreciate that it's on there because I think it does add variety to the album.
You're teeing me up for my hot take.
Okay, let's hear it.
This could be my favorite REM album if it were sequenced differently. It might have been my favorite. Now, my favorite is Life's Rich Pageant. So this album, yes, his vocals are still low in the mix, but there's more clarity on this record. There's more punch.
Yeah.
They rock a little harder in the production. But the album leads with Harbor Code, which is unintelligible. A lot of the vocals, they have the background vocals that kind of jar with the main vocal that make it hard to understand what's being said.
Yeah, it's almost like out of sync.
Right. It's a purposeful trick. Now, I'm not saying I dislike the song, but I would have led this record with Little America. Instead of having that be the last track on side 2, I would have led side 1 with that and then follow with South Central Rain, I'm Sorry, which is really the song that most jumps out as a potential single.
Yeah, I think it's the focal point on the album, really. And it's kind of interesting that Little America they threw at the very end, because actually that's one of my favorite songs on the album.
Yeah, it's a great, tough rock song, very accessible.
I think it's some of Michael Stipe's toughest vocals.
Yeah. It sounds like the kind of song you'd want to start your concert with. Come out swinging.
Yeah.
And this is more of a rockin' sound for them. Now, part of the charm of Murmur is the haziness in the production and the sound. But this is a little more clear, more punch, more rockin'. I would have led with Little America, then South Central Rain, then Seven Chinese Brothers, and continue the album. I might have had Pretty Persuasion as the last track on side one. I still like Second Guessing to start side two just because of the second connection.
And it's a more rockin' song too. Second Guessing is a good rocker, I think.
And then by moving Little America to lead track side one, that makes Don't Go Back to Rockville the final track on side two, which I like. I like that sequencing.
I think that makes way more sense to me too to have Rockville as the last song.
Yeah. But I mean, Harbor Coat, to me, it's kind of generic early REM.
Yeah.
It's got, a beautiful guitar sound and a catchy melody. I like the song, but it's got the obscure vocal, got the more murmur style vocal.
Yes. It's very murky murmur, and
Right,
really, aside from the chorus, you really can't understand anything, and I like the
right.
chorus, but the rest of it is just kind of throwaway, and I agree. It's certainly not strong enough to start the album.
Yeah. It's a lesser song in the record, in my opinion. So you shouldn't lead the record with it. The song I've always loved on this record is Camera.
Yes, it's dark and brooding, but pretty.
Haunting, pretty, and that
Yes.
love the guitar sound he gets. It sounds like a Leslie guitar, a guitar being fed through a Leslie speaker, but I guess it's not. It's just a tone he got on the guitar, but it's a
Mm.
beautiful sound.
Mhm. And I think that song too really focuses a lot on Michael's vocals.
Yes, he's laid bare. You can understand every word he's saying on it.
Yes.
I think Harbor Coat and probably Letter Never Sent are the two songs that stand out the least for me on the record. So I would have probably put them together on side two in the middle and then have Camera, Don't Go Back to Rockville as the last two tracks to close the album strong.
Yeah, Letter Never Sent is kind of different. It doesn't have the arpeggiated sound as much, and it actually sounds like something that could be out of time to me.
It's just a song that doesn't stick in the memory for me. I can never recall the melody
Yeah,
when you give me the title. I mean, when I hear it on the record, it's like, it's good, but I never remember it.
yeah,
Whereas every other title of the melody's indelible in my mind.
right.
What is your favorite song on the record?
It's got to be South Central Rain. That chorus is just so goosebump worthy,
Yeah.
and it's really to me the definitive sound, especially of Michael Stipe's vocals.
And the fact that they went on Late Night with David Letterman
Yes,
and performed this song before Reckoning came out. It was one of the first times they ever performed it live.
it didn't even have a name yet.
Yeah. And they did it on their national live breakthrough on
Yeah,
Letterman. That's ballsy.
yeah. I really like Pretty Persuasion.
Great song. You could make a case that's the most important song on this record because it's not hard to read into the lyrics that it's kind of about gender confusion. And
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, I don't know what Mike Stipe, how he identifies himself sexually. Is he bi or is he gay or,
I think now he says he's gay.
yeah.
I think he's had relationships with men and women, but he identifies as a gay man.
But it's not too hard to read in the lyrics here. I mean, he's got
Yeah.
pretty persuasion. She's got pretty persuasion. God damn, you're confused. I mean,
Yeah.
this is pretty early for a song tackling those kind of topics. And they're not mainstream yet, but they're headed that direction. They're on an upward path, clearly, at this point.
That's one of those things too that I think that Michael Stipe was not willing to have people know about his personal life. So there was a long time where people kind of like speculated about his sexuality. In fact, there was even a time where people thought he had AIDS.
I'm just losing my hair.
Yeah, yeah, he had shaved his head. He was very thin, and, so there was all this speculation. And I guess that might be a big difference between him and, let's say, Bono, where Bono, like, completely embraced the whole idea of being this spokesperson, the front man, where Michael Stipe was more reluctant in that role, but still took it on. That was one of the things that just felt so kind of heartwarming to me to see them now in the last 10 years, even all together. They've always been these same four guys in the band, up until circumstances kind of made that impossible later on in their career. But seeing those different personalities come out and appreciating all that they've gone through over the years and stayed together and stayed true to who they were during all that time, and just the rise to fame and how they grew and changed along with the audience. And it just kind of made me love them even more.
Yeah, this is not the last time we'll be talking about REM on this exercise. There's a lot more great music to come.
We haven't even gotten to my favorite album, which is also your favorite album of
Yep,
theirs.
yep.
Yeah.
So we'll have to arm wrestle and when we get to 1986 to who gets to pick Life's Rich Pageant.
We've had a lot of similarities in our album favorites for the last couple years. Murmur was definitely up there for me. This year, my top 2 were the one I chose and the one you're gonna choose.
So we should talk about something where we're divergent here. Let's look at REM's contemporaries at this time because 1984 was a big year for American independent music. The preeminent label at this time was SST Records out of the LA area, led by Greg Ginn, the guitarist from Black Flag. It was formed basically to put out Black Flag's music, and then they started signing other punk acts, and they were really expanding a lot in the 80s. But things kind of peaked in July of that year when two albums come out on SST Records on the same day. They're both double albums, which is unusual in
Which
and
is
of itself
crazy. Yeah.
for a punk rock or a hardcore band, but just two huge achievements crowning epochal albums in the independent punk rock scene at this time, which is Minutemen's Double Nickels on the Dime and Husker Du's Zen Arcade. They came out on the same freaking day on SST Record, which is
Yeah.
it's just mind-boggling to think about that.
Yes.
I definitely prefer Zen Arcade. You definitely prefer the Minutemen.
Oh, for sure.
I've had both of these albums in my life for a long time. I think I first heard Zen Arcade probably sophomore year of college. I wasn't ready for that music just yet, but it certainly piqued my interest when I first heard it. We had the Minutemen too. We didn't have Double Nickels. We had an earlier one, What Makes a Man Start Fires. It didn't grab me at the time, but once I kind of came to terms with punk rock and hardcore, and particularly the vocals, I was resistant with punk early on because I just didn't like the singing. I wasn't ready for non-traditional vocals like that. But once you start to hear the character and the different voices and what they represent, it just starts to make sense after a while. But I've really come to love Zen Arcade. I think it's just a huge, important classic rock record. But the Minutemen is a trickier one. I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciate the talent there. Their sound is very different from a lot of the other hardcore acts and Husker Du.
Yeah.
They're more like the American Gang of Four, just more kind of funk-based, groove-based music,
Mhm.
and way more political as well.
Yes.
It's like every song is a Dee Boon treatise about something. And I just feel like maybe I've never given that album the investment that it requires. I mean, you got to sit down and read the lyric sheet along while you're listening to it. So it's never really sunk in for me the way that Zen Arcade has.
See, I when you talk about the vocals, I just can't even believe you can get through Bob Mould's vocals with Husker Du because that's what's keeping me from being able to like appreciate that album.
The underlying melodies shine through for me. I mean, not every song is melodic on Zen Arcade. There's a whole side of just furious hardcore punk, which is side 2 of the record, which I dig too. I actually like that side of the record as well. But I mean,
Yeah.
songs like Charter Trips, Somewhere, Newest Industry, Pink Turns
Mhm.
to Blue. There's a lot of good melodic songs on that album. And it's a concept record, even though you can't follow the narrative clearly from start to finish. It's a record that takes you on a journey, which I think all the best records do. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to the story.
Yeah, well, I pretty much mainly just listen for the music without taking into consideration at all like what the theme of the album is or what they're saying. And like for Husker Du, I have tried to listen and appreciate them for years because I love Bob Mould's solo albums. Workbook and Black Sheets of Rain, loved them when they came out.
Sugar,
I like Sugar okay. I like them better than Husker Du because the vocals are not quite as harsh, but it's a little too punky for me, I guess. But I just cannot get past the vocals. They're just so like screamy and screechy and unpleasant, and it just takes away for me anything I could get from the music. And I think like you said, there are quite a lot of songs on here that are melodic, and there are even some where the vocals aren't quite as harsh. And Grant Hart sings lead on some songs too.
yeah, his songs tend to be more pop oriented than Mold's.
Yeah. But I just can't get past it. It's too harsh to me. And the sound is really murky. There's just not enough going on musically to keep me interested.
There's a lot of reasons not to like Husker Du, and the recording quality is certainly one. I mean, that's a frustrating aspect of the band for a lot of fans, I think. I mean, there's
Hmm.
plenty of fans that think that's the band, that's the way they sound. Yes, but they could have been recorded better. It could
Yeah,
have been better.
right.
I think that goes without saying. But that's not the world they were living in. That's not the budget they had. That's not the label. I mean, that's not the way it was for
Well,
them.
and it wouldn't bother me as much if I was into the music, you know?
But I would argue you compare the sound of their records to the Minutemen's records are just they're recorded better. They sound
Yeah,
better.
they sound way better.
The Meat Puppets album sound same labels. They're working with the same people at SST.
Yeah, but it's just the vibe they have.
Yeah.
It's a dirty, murky vibe.
Particularly the drums. The drums are a real sticking point for a lot of people.
And that's one of the things that really makes me love Double Nickels on the Dime. The drums are incredible. And I think that the whole sound, to me are more of a post-punk sound, like you said,
Oh, for
Gang of
sure.
4.
Yeah.
They're not just a punk band. The bass lines are more melodic, it's funky. It is a little wearing being a double album, and I feel the same for both of these albums. It's a lot of music. But the Minutemen, most of their songs are like 2 minutes long,
Yeah.
they're really short, and I just find it much easier to listen to and much more interesting to me. And, it's not like D Boone's vocals are great, but
No.
they don't deter me. That's the thing. They don't deter me like Bob Mold's do.
Here's the other hang up I have, I think, is I got into Firehose before Minutemen. So,
Yeah, I like
you know,
Firehose.
the first Firehose album, Raging Full On, there's two absolute stone cold classic songs on that record that are melodic and
Mhm.
rockin', kick ass.
Yeah.
There just isn't anything like that on the Minutemen album that's that accessible.
I think most of that album is accessible. I just don't feel like it has the songs that stand out as being like a classic, but
Yeah.
it's way more accessible to me than Husker Du.
We'll talk more about Firehose in '86 because I'm sure I'll choose one of those songs for the
Yeah.
playlist. But D. Boone, the lead singer for Minutemen, died tragically in a car accident, and that brought an end to the group. And then they reformed with the bass player Mike Watt and the drummer George Hurley with a new guitarist lead singer.
Ed from Ohio.
Yeah, Ed Crawford. And then that was Firehose. So I knew about Firehose before Minutemen.
Me
I
too.
remember It's on Me. I think I just haven't devoted enough focused listening to Double Nickels. I mean, that's one that kind of requires more of your attention.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of focused listening to Zen Arcade over the years. It's a great headphones listen for me. And even the song Reoccurring Dreams, which is the
The
long
14-minute.
psychedelic tuneless instrumental that closes the record that certainly polarizes a lot of another reason not to like that record. I've always loved that track. In fact, if I listen to that on headphones, it's guaranteed I'm going to fall asleep. I find it soothing.
Well, I've given Husker Du as much time as I'm gonna possibly give it. I'm still not there, and to be honest, I think Reoccurring Dreams I don't mind that song because there's no vocals.
That's part of the charm of the album to me is the psych aspect of it. There's a lot of heavy psych touches to it.
Yeah, I do appreciate that.
Where I struggle is with their next record, New Day Rising, which is a lot of people's favorite. I think it's practically unlistenable because of the way it was recorded. It just sounds so bad.
Oh, well, then I'm really gonna have
Yeah.
troubles with that. I haven't gone there yet because 'cause I'm waiting until we get to those years.
But this was not just Husker Du, but the whole Minneapolis St. Paul scene. I mean, this is an incredible year for the Twin Cities because you had Prince going mega, and we'll certainly be talking about Purple
Yeah,
Rain pretty shortly in an episode to come. So you had the whole orbit around Prince and the time and the black music scene in the Twins, but then the indie bands, Husker Du, Replacements put out Let It Be in
yes,
1984.
yes.
Many people's favorite Replacements album.
Which is another band that it took me a long time to get. Like, I just couldn't get there, but listening to Let It Be is where I finally got it. Nothing up until then had resonated with me at all.
Replacements is a funny band for me. I have a divergent take here where most people love and adore the Replacements and are lukewarm about Paul Westerberg as a solo artist.
Yeah.
I really got more into the mature Paul Westerberg than the
Mm,
young Paul Westerberg. Same with the Smiths and Morrissey. I've listened to a lot of Morrissey solo stuff that I enjoy. For the Smiths, it just didn't connect in the same way, which
hmm.
is very divergent from most people's experience.
Yes.
But the door opening for the Replacements for me was their major label debut, which came out the next year. Tim
Yeah.
and the ballad "Here Comes a Regular" on that. It was his vocals that kind of turned me off for the longest time,
Yeah.
but he's such a great songwriter, such a great songwriter. And then you go back to listen to Let It Be. It's hard to pick a favorite on there. I Will Dare is the, alternative hit.
Yeah, that's kind of the obvious one to me because it's
Yeah,
the most catchy and
it's the
easy to listen
catchy
to.
poppy song, but God, 16 Blue, Unsatisfied,
Yeah.
Answering Machine. These are powerful songs. These are really good songs. And then you have this other throwaway shit on there, which keeps me from loving the album. Stuff like Gary's Got a Boner and Tommy
Tommy
Gets
got
His
his
Tonsils
tonsils
Out.
out.
Back then when you're a young man, it's like, it's funny, but and they were so different from Husker Du too. I mean, that's Husker Du was led by two gay men. I mean, Grant Hart and we didn't know it at the time,
Yeah,
unless you were an insider, you knew, but that didn't come to light until after the band broke up.
right.
Replacements is just a bunch of dudes. I mean, just getting drunk and having a rowdy good time. But they happen to have this super talented, gifted, heartfelt songwriter. And Paul Westerberg, I love listening to him talk, seeing him interviewed. He's so smart. I mean, he's just a really sharp guy and such a great dry wit. Love
Mhm.
listening to him talk.
Androgynous. I
Yes,
mean,
yes. With the replacements, you had a lot of kind of frat boy type fans with that
yes.
band. I think for them it was a laugh. It was like a novelty song, a goof. But you listen to the song and
It's heartfelt.
it is. It's sincere and it's
Definitely feels genuine and
yeah.
sincere, yeah.
And then wasn't it Crash Test Dummies did a cover of that later on?
Yeah.
Yeah. A diversion here too. I might actually like Hootenanny better than Let It Be as an album, but Hootenanny is where they were first showing signs of having a lot more depth than your average hardcore band.
I never got into that album, and those are the ones I tried to listen to and so this is the first one where I was like, "Okay, now I get it." And going forward, I think too, I'll like the albums after this.
Let It Be is their really critical breakthrough album in '84. It's big. And then, you had other bands in the Soul Asylum, their first album comes out
Mhm.
in '84. Say What You Will, Claire, depending on which format you have the album in, as a different title. That's an interesting listen. Bob Mould produced that record. So, Twin Cities, big in '84. And then it would be a few years down the road before these bands started to get signed to major labels.
Yeah.
And then, with the Seattle scene kind of pushing alternative music to the forefront as a commercial commodity, it didn't really explode until the '90s. But these are the bands that really paved the way
Yeah.
for that '90s alternative explosion. And there's a great book, if you're into this era of music, must read, called Our Band Could Be Your Life. And it had been on my agenda to read for the longest time. Finally picked it up, read it. I think there's 11 different bands they profile in that book. It's just a different chapter for each band. And the common theme of the book is how, this is the early days of the touring circuit for these groups, that there really wasn't an established touring circuit for bands like this that weren't on major labels.
Yeah.
They kind of had to figure it out themselves. And
Mhm.
Black Flag were really the trailblazers for this. They played anywhere and everywhere, and they toured hard for years. It just kind of began this underground touring circuit where they'd play college towns and little bars and pizza parlors that would have them. They'd have to sleep on people's floors because they couldn't afford hotel rooms. When they did get hotels, they'd all sleep in the same bed or the same room. I mean, everything was a shoestring. And then one thing I noticed about the book, because one of the great independent bands of this era, another SST band, is Meat Puppets. They
Yeah.
weren't profiled in this book.
Mm.
They're a whole different commodity to these other groups because they're led by these brothers, Kurt and Chris Kirkwood, who just came from immense family wealth. They had no money worries whatsoever. They could do whatever they wanted. So they didn't have to go through a lot of the same travails.
Yeah.
Although they toured the same circuit, they didn't have to worry about sleeping arrangements or where are we going to get our next meal or how are we going to afford to get the van fixed
Totally
because they were just
different life.
filthy, stinking
Yes.
rich.
But, I like the Meat Puppets album.
I
I
do
think it's like
too.
it's like minimalist DIY countrified kind of rock and the thing about this too is I'd say the singer is out of tune most of the time.
And time, out of tune and out of time.
It doesn't bother me though.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me like it bothers me when you have those vocals like Husker Du's and Arcade where it's just like the Meat Puppets. I think that it has this druggy kind of homespun charm to it that
Oh
is
god, they were
that,
soaked in drugs.
yeah, but I like it. And also, I was listening to the album, I'm like a couple songs, I'm like, "These sound familiar. Why do I know these songs?" It's because Nirvana covered them on their Unplugged album. They covered like 3 songs, I think, from that album on the Unplugged performance.
So I was thinking about this. First of all, very cool of Kurt Cobain to do that. But you think about it, think of all of these struggling indie bands that he could have given a big lift to, because
Yeah.
obviously that was a huge boon to Meat Puppets' career. They shortly thereafter signed to a major. Actually, they were on a major before that. When I first became aware of Meat Puppets was their first London Records album, Forbidden Places, which came out when we were working at Silver Platters.
Mhm.
That's when I first heard them, and I was really intrigued. But then Nirvana covers 3 songs off Meat Puppets 2, their 1984 album,
Yes.
on the MTV Unplugged record they put out, which was a huge sensation,
Yeah.
and it's worthy of the attention. It's an incredible performance by Cobain and company. But they play not one cover, not 3 off the same record, and bring the guys in to participate as well. So the Kirkwoods are in there in the room performing with Nirvana.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So you think about all these great indie bands that were barely getting by and sleeping on floors and
Yeah.
barely eating. All these bands they could have given a lift to. And it's these 2 guys that never had to worry about money in their entire lives.
Well, when I was listening to this album, I thought it's so obvious that Kurt Cobain is a fan of this band, and he sounds so much like them. And then I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. That's because this is the song they've covered."
Right. Omi, Plateau, and Lake of Fire, all
Yeah.
on that Meat Puppets 2, which is such an unusual record.
Yeah.
Such a strange record, but it's a fascinating listen. And I'm like you, it's like it's just part of the character, the tuneless vocals and the
Yeah.
now, granted, had I heard this when it came out in '84, and I would have been blissfully aware of any of these bands or records at the time, I wouldn't have known that
No.
Husker Du or Replacements or any of these bands. Barely knew REM, and I didn't know REM until the next year, in fact.
Yeah.
So if I would have heard this at the time, I'd be like, "Oh my god, these guys can't play. This is awful. This guy can't sing a lick."
Yeah.
But they can play. They could play rings around most bands. They're incredible musicians. The 3 guys in the Meat Puppets. But they were all prep school kids, all out of Brophy Prep, which doesn't necessarily mean they were all stinking rich. But in the case of the Kirkwoods, they were. I mean, their grandfather on their mother's side was this super wealthy businessman who they had like a family compound in Acapulco where they lived and flew around in Lear jets. I mean, they weren't just comfortably middle class. They were living in a completely different stratosphere from most independent musicians.
Well, I think of the albums from this year and like SST, the ones that were like the least interesting to me were the Black Flag albums.
My War starts out really cool. I love the title track, the first track on there. Then you keep listening, a couple other songs, and then, God, it just gets tedious.
It sounds more like a throwback to heavy metal to me than punk. It's like Black
And
Sabbath,
it
you
is. It
know?
is. That's
Mhm.
exactly what it was and was intended to be. But you've got a much less interesting vocalist than Ozzy Osbourne fronting the and
Yes.
Henry Rollins' vocals just really wear
Yeah.
after a short period of time. It's just shouting. There's no singing whatsoever,
Yes. Then that kind of feels like the only hardcore part to me is his vocals. The music sounds like 60s classic rock,
which is
or
cool. Which is
metal.
cool in my book, but
Yeah.
it becomes less and less. The first track is a winner, but then it quickly slides downhill after that. I didn't really get through the whole
Well, they
record.
put out 3 albums in 1984, and the other ones are also just not that interesting to me, and one of them is the first side is all spoken word, and the second side is all instrumentals, like experimental type instrumentals, so
And actually, Henry Rollins did put out some interesting spoken word stuff
I
in
think
the
he's
'80s and
probably
that. Yeah,
more well known for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But as a vocalist, a little goes a long way. Saw the Rollins band live in Phoenix, and it's kind of the same deal. I mean, the music had slowed down even more, and it was more, heavy, grungy
Yeah.
sounding rock, but it's still just tuneless Henry Rollins up front screaming about whatever he's angry about. I just don't have a whole lot of stomach for it.
It's wearing.
Yes, it's wearing.
Yeah.
But outside of Reckoning, what would you pick as your favorite American indie album from this year?
American indie album. Okay. Well, I don't know what else is on the list, but I'd probably say Double Nickels on the Dime
Yeah.
is the most interesting to me and the one I would wanna go back to.
I mean, you got Sonic Youth too on the SST label, but I've always been somewhat resistant to them.
Yeah, me too.
Just too New York arty, pretentious for me. I mean, again, I need to give it more time.
Plus, this is early years for those bands too, so
Right.
maybe as we
Yeah.
go along, I would appreciate them more, but the early stuff is not so much, and so I'd say Double Nickels and then Replacements, Let It Be. That is one that I have gone back to now several times and listened to more.
And I think we're signposting the times ahead. We're going to be picking more and more stuff from the alternative field as we go along into the 80s.
Yeah, and when you talk about alternative indie, like, to me, this era really is more about the UK, the stuff that's coming out in England. That's the alternative, the indie stuff that I really appreciate, and we'll definitely talk more about that too as we go along.
So, adding to the playlist, our first global smash of 1984, Tina Turner's What's Love Got to Do with It? That's my choice. Sheryl will have a global smash choice down the line as well. And we've got more goodies to come. Obviously, we'll be talking Prince and Bruce and all of the big 1984 records
Yeah.
before we get through with this year. An incredible year for popular music.
Yeah, and huge albums that I just find so fascinating to go back to and listen to now because I really did not want to ever hear them ever again at the time.
All right. Until the next time, folks, thanks for joining us. I'm Matt Sherrill's Gen X Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
Take care, everybody.